All right, so this lick has three concepts we're going to touch on. The first one is how Guthrie kind of does that contrasting thing all the time where he plays real melodically and then it leads into the faster stuff instead of just playing fast all the time and then nothing really standing out. And so what he does here is he approaches this idea by doing right? So that's where he starts getting into that chromatic thing. And we're doing it real slow so you can see what's going on. But you see how at first it's just really, really melodic, bending a lot of notes. And this is walking up the scale now. So he slides up a few times to get to the position of the chromatic thing, and then he gets into this flurry of... And if you notice, that whole first part on the E string is just chromatic notes going from the 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, and 14. But again, to get more notes out of that, he repeats things, but again, the patterns are never repetitive. So it's 4 notes pulling off, sliding down, then hammer on 3 notes, slide down 1 fret, pull off, and hammer on. So then he pulls off 3 notes again. So it's this 4 note, 2 note, 2 note, 3 note kind of thing. As opposed to a lot of people might do, and just keep doing a pattern of 3 notes. And then after that he gets into he gets into what looks kind of like pentatonics. And then here he slides up and down and he starts doing things where he's pulling off a few notes, then he pulls off and hammers on. And again, that whole little sequence that he does, there's not one repetitive thing where he's just running down. He's not just running down 3 note, 3 note, 3 note. So really take a look at, when you do your improvisation, the little patterns that you get into. Try not to do, if you like this kind of stuff, to get too pattern oriented where it's real, somebody could pick out, oh, he did 3 notes, then 2 notes, then he repeated it, then he. So that's the first concept, and now we'll get on to the second concept. All right, so this lick is something that we discussed in an earlier lick, but it's being used in a slightly different way. And this is a great example of how you could take these concepts and use them slightly different to come up with completely different ideas. So this is where he's walking up this. Right? So he basically, again, you hear that little pattern of 2 notes pivoting off back and forth. Then he just walks up a chromatic scale. And then he gets to those higher notes. But the thing you look at here is this is really just an arpeggio. It's just a G flat major arpeggio. Root, third, root, major third, fifth, and root. And he's just approaching it by half step, each one of those notes. So you have, and then he walks up chromatically. Right? Now what you can do is you can continue up that arpeggio if you know the whole thing. Right? And approach each one of those bouncing off with a half step behind the original note. So you have, right? So now you can start that lick anywhere. Instead of starting here, you can start it here. Right? And do it with everything. Do it with, say, an A major arpeggio. Say you have your A, well, let's do an A major arpeggio. So you have your A chord, and just take each one of those notes and approach it by a half step. Right? Now you don't have to, again, run all the way up and down. If you notice, Guthrie just does it here in one octave, and then he starts thinking chromatically. So it's not like he goes up, 8 notes of an arpeggio and then goes into something else. He usually only does it for a few seconds. So say you were doing, say, A minor pentatonic stuff, right? And you had... So that's just doing... I just took those last 3 notes on the 5th fret of the G, B, and E string and approached them by half step. And then slid back into that 8th fret, the C note. So that's just one example. There's a million, again, you can use this in arpeggios, in scales, in every lick that you know, approach things by half steps. So now let's get into the last idea in this lick. All right, so for the last concept in this lick, we're going to look at another chromatic line. He uses a lot of chromatic things, but if you notice, all of them seem to be really different from one another. They're never just, 4-note chromatic sequences that repeat and repeat. So this one, he walks up chromatically. Right, and he starts doing that kind of thing. And if you notice what he's doing, he gets to that 16th fret of the E string, and besides the notes that he plays on the B string, he walks down from 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, skips the 10th fret, and he does 9, 8, 7, 6. So it's basically every note from the 16th fret to the 6th fret, but he skips that 10th fret for whatever reason. It just ends up being that way. So this pattern sounds like this. And then he just gets into B minor pentatonic stuff. But again, you take notice of how each one of those little sequences is just slightly different in the way he pivots off the B string. But it's essentially just one long chromatic line.